Tēnā koe, everybody. Look, I'm missing a councillor right now, but I'm mindful of the time. We're running a little late, but I think we'll kick off, and I will, in doing so, I will ask Dale Marie if she would open for us this morning.
Tēnā tātou I te whare. He rangi a tāhua, he rangi horoi tēnei ki wahura. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa. Te kaunihira, ka whakamanu hiri tia koutou e a au, haumie, huie, tai. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora, Dale Marie. Thank you. Look, I just wanted to acknowledge and welcome our gallery there. Nice to see you all here. Glad to see that we have some people in the whare who are interested in the discussions we're going to have today. And I'm absolutely convinced there will be people online listening into by way of streaming. I also want to acknowledge Roger Gordon, who's one of our councillors online there. He's not able to be with us in person today, but nevertheless beaming in. And also Wendy Emling, who is our one of our legal advisors from Tompkins Wake. She is there online. Good morning, Wendy. Lovely to see you. So with those introductions taken care of, I shall pass the floor over to Kirsty and Mika to take the matter forward.
Tēnā koutou katoa. This morning I am going to be leading the workshop session on a submission on the proposed waste to energy plant, but I am well supported by Wendy from Tompkins Wake online, and in the room Mika from our strategy team, and Peter Skilton from our district planning and growth team, and also just want to acknowledge the work that has been undertaken by David Topman, who in terms of preparing material, he's currently with family in South Africa, so just want to acknowledge him also. Just with regard to the workshop session today, I think it's fair to say that this is something that is complex and that none of us have experienced. This is new technology, and the process that we're working under is also new. So none of us profess to be experts, and we are going to be providing you with information at a high level, and we'll be seeking feedback from you with a view to getting direction from you as to whether you wish us to proceed in formulating a submission on behalf of Council, and if so, some key focus areas that we might include in that submission. If that's the direction provided, then we'll be coming back to you to a Strategic Planning and Policy Committee meeting on the 3rd of December with a draft submission seeking approval for that prior to lodging. So just by way of overview as to the application and the process. So this was an application from Global Consulting Solutions to develop and operate a waste to energy plant at Racecourse Road in Te Awamutu. The resource consent applications were lodged with both the Waikato Regional Council and with Waipa District Council in December of 2021, so quite some time ago now. They were jointly publicly notified by both councils in 2023, and there were over 800 submissions received, most of those in opposition to the application. The application was then referred to the Minister for the Environment by Waipa District Council and Waikato Regional Council, earlier this year. And the reasons for that being the proposal provided for new technology, also the impact of greenhouse gas emissions and the level of community interest that had been communicated. So as you're aware, the Minister in August of this year called in the application and referred it to a board of inquiry, and the Environmental Protection Authority are overseeing that board of inquiry process. In terms of the reason for that, the matters in the proposal are considered to be of national significance. So now I'm just going to speak to the process itself. The Board of Inquiry process requires the Minister to appoint a board to consider the application, so it's now separate from the councils. And the board will comprise members who have local knowledge of the community in which this proposal is proposed to operate, understanding of the Resource Management Act, expertise relevant to the proposal, and also knowledge of tikanga Māori. The board has 9 months to consider and determine the application. And the Board of Inquiry process also enables the consideration of greenhouse gas emissions, and iwi are able to nominate members to be part of that Board of Inquiry. Submissions that have been made previously to either Waipa District Council and or Waikato Regional Council will still be considered. They'll be part of the process. So people who made a submission don't have to then provide that on to the Board of Inquiry. But it also provides an opportunity for others to come forward. And so it provides an opportunity for council now to consider whether it wishes to make a submission, as might other members of the community. Those submitters who participated in the earlier processes submitting to the councils and who indicated that they wished to be heard, that will also be captured by the Board of Inquiry, and that they will be provided with that opportunity also. Apologies, I am trying to multitask, and also I may need to refer to notes because, as I mentioned at the outset, this is incredibly complex and outside my area of expertise, so bear with me as we make our way through. The purpose of this slide is to provide an outline of the proposed development in terms of the location at Racecourse Road. In terms of the application, it outlines reasoning for the proposed location. It considers iwi connection, environmental impacts, zoning, territorial engagement, transportation, access to the power grid, fuel, water, and economic reasons. I'm not going to go into those, but there were a number outlined in the application, and all of that information is available online. You'll see there that surrounding the site, there are industrial activities, and the Fonterra factory is depicted to the west. There are residential areas that also surround this site, and the Te Awamutu racecourse is also shown there. And that's part of the T13 future growth cell. So that's to the north and the east. And there are also sports grounds, Te Wananga o Aotearoa, Kohanga Reo, and Play Centre to the south. So the site, it's proposed, would be accessed off Racecourse Road. The plant is proposed to consist of 4 buildings. The largest of these is the building containing the furnace and the boiler system. That's over 7,000 square metres and 35 metres high, with emission stacks which would provide for a further 3 metres. This diagram provides an outline of the proposed functional spaces and processes, and this information was provided as part of the assessment of environmental effects. It's proposed that the plant would process 480 tonnes of refuse a day, and that would comprise 400 of that would be incinerated and 80 would be recycled at the plant. It would provide power through 2 turbines to generate an anticipated 15 megawatts of electricity. That's enough power to provide for approximately 14,000 average households, or enough to provide for all of the energy needs of approximately 1/3 of the households in Waipa District. So the incineration would generate approximately 100 tonnes of material a day. That includes 23 tonnes of ash, 22 tonnes of metals and 55 tonnes of miscellaneous recyclable material. It's also proposed that the plant would employ 60 staff. Next slide. Thank you, Mika. So it's really important for us to bear in mind that council to date has had a role as a regulator, and we need to keep the regulatory functions separate. At this point, we are able to make a submission bringing to the attention of the Board of Inquiry issues that council believes they ought to consider. And the regulatory arm of council has provided a report through to the Board of Inquiry identifying key issues. The same has also been submitted by Waikato Regional Council. But we'll come back to that shortly. So the purpose of this slide is to outline to you the regulatory areas identified in the key issues reports that have been presented by Waipa District Council as well as Waikato Regional Council, and they're prepared under the Resource Management Act. So when the Board of Inquiry makes its decision, it will consider the application, the submissions that have been made to both of the councils under the first round of publicly notified submissions. It will consider the reports that have been provided by Waipa District Council and Waikato Regional Council identifying key issues. It will also consider greenhouse gas emissions and any other relevant Resource Management Act regulations. Apologies, I just need to reference my notes, and there are a lot. Mika has ensured that I am well prepared. Okay, we're almost there. In terms of council submission, acknowledging that we're not experts in this field, we've got a limited time frame to be able to respond. Submissions are due by the 18th of December, right before Christmas. And we have limited availability in terms of resourcing to be able to prepare a submission. So we're suggesting that our focus ought to be on location, on placemaking, community interest and community wellbeing. And there's guidance that's provided by the legislation. So we're going to now just talk through these key groupings, focusing on social and community effects. As you know, the Local Government Act, as it currently provides for the four wellbeing, social, cultural, economic and environmental. And those wellbeings have been a focus of Council's vision and the community outcomes that we developed in consultation with the community as part of our 21-31 long-term plan. And the work that we've undertaken in developing Ahuaki Waipa Community Spatial Plan has very much been focused on community wellbeing. That's at the heart of that plan, and ensuring that we successfully deliver on social, cultural, economic and environmental wellbeing. The community, through the submissions that have been made and also through feedback that we've heard and seen within our communities, has been focused on the social and community effects. There's been concerns raised about the effect on Rosetown, on Te Awamutu, and the stigma that might be attached. Decisions on people being made by families choosing to locate to Te Awamutu, and the close proximity of educational facilities within the proposed site. Potential impacts on the economic and socio-economic well-being of our communities, and also those health impacts, not only, I guess, that mental and social well-being of our communities. Staff are recommending that if council wish to make a submission, that one of our focus areas is social and community effects, but that what the point that we should be communicating to the board is that there isn't enough evidence that the proposed waste to energy plant will actually uphold our community wellbeing. A social impact assessment was requested from the applicant back in December of 2023, and that hasn't yet been provided. So as part of a submission, we would also be recommending that we request a social impact assessment be provided by the applicant. I'm happy to stop and ask for questions or
Yeah,
feedback on that.
absolutely. Thanks for that, Kirsty. Doing a great job. Claire.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. And I totally endorse the approach that you're taking. And with that social impact assessment, I'd be really keen that there was teasing out of various parts of our community or demographic, because, you know, something that's always struck me is the close proximity of the proposed location to early childhood centres, the sports fields, the college and other schools right there. So I'd be worried that if it was a broad social impact assessment, it wouldn't take into account the particulars. I do see a particular risk for the impacts on those. And also, I'm not sure if this is the right place, but maybe under the interface of activities and locations, like that large area where the race courses is designated as then intensified, compact housing. So with those housing zones, and I appreciate that Peter's in the room, often you do get associated other activities there because you've got a high density population. And, you know, it could easily be anticipated that there'd be further institutions or facilities there that would also be put at greater risk. Yeah. And while I appreciate that, like with the social impact, they'll probably say, well, you're going to get a lot of cheaper energy and more jobs and that kind of thing. But if it's going to be at the cost of, a healthy living environment, or we're actually putting at risk the next generation, that's the kind of thing that I'd like to be covered in that social impact report.
Thank you for that feedback, Claire. That's great. Are you happy for me to move on?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, Kirsty.
Great. So the next focus area that we're suggesting be included in the submission relates to the location of the proposal, and this probably brings into the points that you've just raised also, Claire. So just in terms of our responsibility, we have legislative and moral responsibilities to our community too, to provide for the well-being of not only current generations and communities in Waipa, but also those future communities and generations. So we've talked within our strategic documents through Ahawaki, particularly around the importance of placemaking. So through the submission process, a number of community residents have expressed a concern about the proposed development and the major and lasting effects on the local community in the town of Te Awamutu. There has been concern raised that mitigation measures and considerations haven't been appropriately provided, that there's a lot of uncertainty about the impacts that this will have on the community. Concern also about the appropriateness of the location, given that mixed use, residential, industrial, but also the close proximity to waterways and the like. So council staff recommendation, again, if we're to proceed with the development of a submission, is that we include that the location of the proposed plant may adversely affect the amenity and character of the adjacent residential area, not as well as Te Awamutu and Waipa as being a desirable district to live, work, invest in, recreate in, and that the proposed plant may very well have long-lasting impacts that are detrimental on the future economic and social well-being of our community, as well as the growth of Te Awamutu.
Claire, and I'll go after you.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, I'm really pleased that you're going to explore this too. And I guess I want to be very careful how I put my position. Like, I totally agree with the opportunity for a business to want to try and set up some sort of process like this. I suppose my stance is, one, is it going to be not produce long-term effects on the environment, which will, I'm sure, be an important part of the process, but also that there may be more appropriate locations for it to, find a home rather than within a residential area or something. And in fact, I am quite concerned too about its proximity to Fonterra because, it's a food processing plant, they want to make sure that there's no contamination whatsoever, and I presume that they will be making a submission anyway. What I'm really worried about is that there might be statements made by the applicant that the technology is clean and it's the cutting edge, the best that could be provided. And so the risks of long-term environmental harm, are really minimal. But I don't know if that's the case. And also, I'm really conscious of the fact that over time, what seemed to be quite a safe and, not going to harm the environment, I suppose, process, suddenly, you get in new evidence that that's not the case. Like, I'm pretty familiar with the plight of millions of people in France who, that they live in an area where there are waste to energy plants, and I've been informed that the European waste to energy plants are really, really stringent environmental standards that they easily comply with. And yet now they were warned not to eat eggs from backyard chickens due to forever chemical pollution that is due. It's been traced back to those combustion, I suppose, byproducts, from waste to energy plants. So, would I like to endorse an application or sort of support, be part of a submission where we're saying we're quite happy to leave that decision to those experts? Well, I'd actually really like to say this is really important for us. We don't want to compromise, the safety of our community. And I'm into growing my own food. I'd be really annoyed if I couldn't have chickens or something just because there was a waste energy plant consented 10 years ago or something. We do have to take the longer term view, I think. And just because, there's a view at the moment that it's probably going to meet environmental standards, but what certainty will we be that in the future that's going to be revised because we've actually had to live with an impact we don't want to live with. Whether or not the Board of Inquiry can delve into that a bit more for us to give us more assurance, I don't know. But it's also whether or not the plant itself is to that highest standard, and whether or not you've got a monitoring regime, or does New Zealand actually have suitable standards to be able to make sure that that plant is actually going to be operated to the, I suppose, the best operating model that it'll produce very, very little or negligible pollution. So.
Cool. Thanks, Claire. Just picking up on a couple of points you've made there and sort of taking a couple of those threads a little further. You sort of mentioned there, Kirsty, about sort of considering the long-lasting impact on immediate surrounds. I kind of if we extrapolate that out further, you sort of talked about Te Awamutu and then potentially the stigma or what have you like around Waipa. With my farming hat on, I'm immediately going to the place of worst case scenario, any other long-term impacts along the lines of where you're going, Claire, but on an agricultural sector scale, and the impact that would not have only on those particular farmers, but then the industry in its totality. And let's be honest, Waipara is underpinned by the agri sector. So I just I want some real focus on that, I guess, both at a personal level and at a council mayoral level. Yeah, that the stakes are extremely high, I guess, and I'd want to make sure that inquiry around those negative impacts aren't just limited to the neighbouring streets.
Kia ora tātou. And I think there's because Kirsty, this isn't at you at all, because I know that you're having to deliver this for us for the submission, but I have to put on the record today with regards to this being on the table. It's like, where's the toxic ash going to go? Where's the dumping of the water going to go? Sourcing of the water. You know, that's a big issue when it comes to this area and our statutory requirements that we have with Waikato Tainui. The scale and model of this plant, it would be really good if we could have a scale that could show us how big that's going to look like in our town properly. If we have got one, can we please put it up? Because the other thing that I noted too, when you mentioned the early childhood and the educational centres around there, Te Aumatu College is, that field there is Te Aumatu Colleges. That's where they have their rugby practice and all of that. So the other thing I want to bring to everybody's attention while I've got the mic on is the Plume Potter website, and then you'll see the scale of emissions and how that works when it comes to incineration plants. And I picked up the 100 tonnes of rubbish per day. If the plant stops, that still keeps coming. And I don't think we've got anything to mitigate that here at Waipara if that happened. And I think that's it for me so far. So kia ora, Kirsty.
Kia ora. I'm just checking with my teammate here, but I think we have got a depiction, haven't we, of what it would look like in our landscape, that if we're not able to provide it today, we can certainly make that available to you.
It is online in one of those documents that has been provided. We'll just see if we can put it online, screenshot, but it is publicly available.
Sorry, what specifically are you talking about?
The image of the
Here it is.
Ah, okay, I'm with you now. I missed the.
southwesty, and yeah, racecourse in between. And this is with the mitigation planting along the bottom, so you can see the size of the trees that are being proposed, obviously when they get to their full height, and then yeah, the Fonterra factory in the background. I guess a little side note is the size of the chimneys. They are proposed at 3 meters, but there has also been designed at different heights for potential different emission impacts.
Good. Thank you, Zoe. If we can just now revert back to the PowerPoint presentation, and thank you for that feedback, Councillor Dale Marie. So that then leads us to the third focus area, which was touched on by Dale Marie, and this is iwi and mana whenua considerations. So as you know, we have legislative responsibilities to iwi and mana whenua, and they also feed down into joint management agreement responsibilities with our Waikato Tainui, Rokawa and Te Nihinui Maniapoto partners. Just for awareness, Mika and I did attend the Ngā Iwi Tōpū o Waipā meeting on Monday of this week, just to provide an update as to the process and also to provide advice that we were leading this workshop with elected members today. So just in full transparency, wish to make you aware of that. A number of submissions have expressed concerns about what the proposal will mean for the whenua, the community and the awa. And a cultural impact assessment was formally requested from the applicant on the 18th of December 2023. To note, that has not yet been provided. A possible submission point for us in this area is to request that a comprehensive cultural impact assessment be prepared to better understand all of the cultural issues involved and also to identify all of the affected mana whenua groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of goes without saying, right? And I would assume that that there would be a significant portion of that would relate to Te Whaimana. I mean, has that even, I mean, I have to apologise, I haven't read every single word of the application, but is there any effort to address the specific regional obligations in respect of Te Whaimana at all? Are you aware of it at all?
There was an assessment completed against the environmental management plan for Waikato Tainui and for one other thing, but it wasn't as comprehensive as it's possibly needed for something so complex. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember the other plan right now, but
Okay.
yeah, there were 2 assessments completed on smaller plans, not to.
But Susan, you make a valid point that that is a point of difference for this area.
Absolutely.
That needs to be included in the
Absolutely.
submission
A
specifically.
guiding point, I would have thought.
Yep.
Sorry, and that because of Te Ture Whaimana, that is also one of the reasons that iwi are able to select someone to go on the board or propose someone to go on the board. So it is already triggered in the system, but yeah, not from the applicant. So.
Clear.
Yeah, just on, I'm going to delve into the sort of native biodiversity side of things, which is kind of where iwi and mana whenua considerations obviously, yeah, are often focused, because I'm aware that the Mangapiko stream, you know, is part of that ecological or biodiversity corridor that's designated in our district plan, and the proximity of, you know, the waste to energy plant, it's going to have an impact on that ecosystem, I guess, that you know, that complexity of a stream and gully and wetlands, and you know, that are all there in the riparian margins. And it's not just the fact of the physical location, but the discharge or the emissions, and then rainfall and stormwater. Yeah, so I can't see how the operation of the waste to energy plant would not be able to impact the stream in some form. And native bats, you know, they're a highly mobile indigenous species, and they're critically endangered. So you'd want to make sure that the applicant is right across that and can give some pretty strong and robust assurances that, yeah, that they would not be harmed by that, the proximity, yeah, to that corridor, which native bats, I don't know if native bats have actually been detected within the urban boundaries of Tuamutu, but it's got all of the hallmarks of it, because they like to travel, you know, along those streams. And that the second thing about the proximity of the stream is, I did see in the application that they have a particular thing about protection from fire, or, you know, like firefighting capability on site. Now, there have been some pretty high profile examples of where chemicals that are used in fighting fires, or you know, like when you're doing drills and practices, they use particular chemicals that are very long lasting and end up in streams or groundwater. Yeah, and I do know that it's in the application that they're going to be providing for that. So I'd be worried that simply by providing for it, that's also going to be a source of contamination for the Mangapiko eventually. Yeah.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you for raising that. So in terms of the Mangapiko, there is actually a cultural overlay area within the district plan for that area, a cultural alert overlay for the Mangapiko. So that's really great feedback that we will ensure is incorporated into the submission.
Sorry, my apologies. There was an assessment completed against Te Ture Whai Mana and against Tai Tumu, Tai Pare, Tai Ao, Waikato, Tai Nui's environmental plan. So there was an assessment completed against Te Ture Whai Mana.
Can I ask who completed that?
The a planner on behalf of the applicant.
Okay,
But
so
we-
it's not
we
not
can-
independently.
We can drill down into that, and have a look at that and
I think it's
ensure that
critical.
that is referenced
Absolutely
within the
critical.
submission, absolutely. If you're happy for me to speak to the next focus area, suggested focus area. And this is in relation to the circular economy. So we have a waste minimisation and management plan, acknowledging that this was approved in 2023. So after the submission of this application to the two councils. And that plan provides for, reducing the amount of waste that goes to landfill and provides for a target in terms of better recycling practices. So there is a concern that there is a risk that the waste needs of the proposed plant run counter to the aims of this plan. And also moving our communities and the economy towards a more circular economy in line with the government's waste strategy, which also was adopted in 2023. So that is, I guess, recommended as a submission point within the council's submission, that we reference both our waste minimisation plan and also Ministry for the Environment's waste strategy, and expressing concern about the use of waste as feedstock instead of moving it towards a more circular economy. I'm happy to take any feedback or questions on that slide, and then we kind of move to next steps.
Marie.
Oh, kia ora no, Kirsty. Sorry, just asking the our national standards and stuff like that. Can we also think about what our international standards that we've committed to as a country? Can we take that into consideration as well when we're looking at some of that stuff? Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further on that?
I might come back to you on this one, Kirsty, if I can, offline. I've got quite a bit of stuff here I had meant to read in this space, but I have a real concern about the disincentivization, if there is such a word, I just make that one up, to shift away from minimising the waste we create into just thinking, oh, it's fine, because there's a windfall to this. I guess I think we've done so much work as a country, and specifically as we've had some really awesome waste minimisation staff on council and continue to do so. And I think we punch quite well in that space. And I guess it just feels counter to that. It just doesn't, my gut tells me this doesn't feel right in terms of adhering to that policy. It may be at some point in time, something like this is necessary, because you're never going to minimise everything, right? But I just, maybe it's a matter of timing. I don't know. It just feels weird to me. And I guess, when you travel internationally into jurisdictions where these do exist, there's zero provision for recycling. Zero, nothing visible anyway in the places anecdotally that I've been. And it just sort of feels weird because we put so much energy into trying to minimise waste creation and then look at, recycling and, it just, I don't know, it just philosophically, it sits very awkwardly in my head and heart. So I've got a bit more reading here to do. So can I go take this offline with you and perhaps fish out something a little bit more coherent than just saying it feels weird? Is that okay? Pardon?
Thank you, Susan.
Cool.
Yes, we can make that work. As you'll see there's quite a tight timeframe now, in that whilst we're proposing to bring a formal report and draft submission to the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee meeting on the 3rd of December, that agenda will go out next week. So the team will be working hard to ensure that we meet those timeframes and provide a comprehensive draft submission. Just for your awareness, we understand that it is the intention of Waikato Regional Council to make a submission, but they're still working through their required approval processes. And then the intention to lodge well in advance of the closing for submissions on the 18th of December. Yeah.
Andrew.
I guess it would be nice to have all our rubbish dealt with I mean, we can't keep chucking everything in landfill, that's for sure. But even if I was completely reassured as to the quality of emissions, which I'm not, this is surely in the wrong place. What the hell? It's just crazy. And so I would support the everything you've said basically so far in terms of putting submissions in. Yeah.
Steph, and then Roger, I see you have your hand up online. Oh, are you sure? Roger, can we hear from you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Susan. Look, I'd just like to support the presentation that Kirsty has given today. Not an easy job for her to do. I'd like to thank Claire also and yourself for the points that you've raised. My main concern is really that it is new technology. And although there are many statements that have been made about the quality of the emissions, etc., and it's unproven. And we don't know what the future impact is going to be because there's no evidence that's there. So I really am concerned about that aspect. And I do think that what Andrew said, it's in the wrong place. You know, when you look at the amenity value of that area, the impact that that's going to have on the amenity value is going to be considerable. So yes, certainly support all of the points that have been raised going forward. So thank you very much, Kirsty and team.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks, Roger. Steph.
Kia ora. And again, I just want to reiterate those comments of thanks, Kirsty. I know you've pulled this together, the team, everyone's been in behind it, acknowledging the other staff too that are in the gallery. Just to Andrew's point is, I wonder whether there's a sort of a macro picture here which we want to rebut back to government, and that they're building an infrastructure agency looking at a 30-year pipeline of infrastructure, key infrastructure for New Zealand, and within the parameters and the hierarchy of their waste management legislation, which has gone through significant rework in recent years. In fact, so I understand it to be the most significant reform of waste management in New Zealand's history, led by former Minister Eugenie Sage, but it has carried on under respective ministers, that we look to encourage the government to see this as a strategic infrastructure play for New Zealand, but that the private sector is stepping into what is obviously perceived to be a gap in the absence of clear national direction, because the location issues are a default because there is no national direction on how this should play through against a hierarchy, whether it's reduce, reuse, recycle, etc. And so what we're finding is these localized impacts of these probably well-intentioned propositions, but in fact, this requires national direction for such a piece of infrastructure, and hence it's been called in, which is a good thing. So I just wonder whether we also ask the government to pick this up from a more strategic perspective and give good public sector guidance, and that will direct the private sector to the right place, the right time, the right type of technology, etc. As often we experience in local government, we're feeling the effects of perhaps a lack of coordination and lack of direction but that involves us as well. So just wondering whether we can include something like that, Kirsty.
Great
And whether that's
feedback,
relevant.
Steph.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent point. And just before we sign off, can we also interrogate the point of I'm not satisfied that the feedstock is actually theirs to claim that they have. I mean, I don't profess to being an expert in terms of the waste industry, but my very, superficial understanding is that that is kind of bought ahead of time. So I'm kind of struggling to understand where a lot of that would come from. So, and I'm not sure if there's any tension or interrogation around that.
I believe that was a further information request
okay.
to ask if there had been any agreements made with any territorial authorities. But as far as I could see, there was no response to that.
Okay. So if we could sort of not drop that, because I mean, that's kind of crucial piece, right? 24/7, 7 days a week. Yeah. It'll only go so far, Andrew. Yeah. If we can keep pressure on trying to get some clarity around where that feedstock comes from, because my understanding is those waste streams are under contract with, is it 2 or 3 companies, like, years and years in advance. In order, because they have to buy obviously landfill space and blah, blah, blah. It's all, but yeah, if they need to be confident that they will have that feedstock, and I've just got a little bit of a question mark over that. Excellent. Hey, look, just want to emphasise your this thanks given to the 2 of you and to David and to Wendy online, just hanging in there. It's a very I mean, we all know it's caused a great deal of community engagement, and I'll put that in inverted commas. And it's a space that we've been legislatively and regulatory bound to stay in our lane on, and I know that in and of itself has caused some angst. But I'd like to think that we're now in a space where we can actually exert some kind of submission that underscores the importance of the work that we do in that place making and wellbeing space, and allays some of the concerns potentially from the community around our sort of appeared absence from the dialogue. But the reality is that was for very good reason. So look, thank you for your work, and thank you for people who are listening online. It's good to have some community connectedness around an issue, albeit a perhaps in some people's views, not a particularly positive one, but it's nevertheless, good community activity, which is great to see. So look forward to receiving that submission and full course of draft submission. Cheers, Kirsty. And Megha, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, team. So we've got lunch now.
Now it's lunch. And I'll return at 1 o'clock, I believe.
So we might them.
I'll see you at 1, Roger.
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. Ahi ahi Mārie. If I could just call everybody back to their seats and give me your attention just for a short moment. Obviously, this is a workshop in respect of Waikato Water Done Well and discussing our heads of agreement. We're being streamed, obviously, online. We have Roger Gordon, one of our councillors online, but we also have a whole host of expertise in the room, which I will endeavour to introduce to not only those in the room, but people watching. Today, obviously, this presentation is being delivered to us by Vaughan Payne, who is no stranger to you, but obviously Vaughan is leading the Waikato Water Done Well process and together with Calvin French from CoLab and Sinead Hart. They're all working together in this body of work. Vaughan has brought with him today Marlon Bridge, ex-DIA, is that right? Or currently DIA, ex-Water Care. Yeah, so, and I believe some of you would have heard Marlon at Zone 2 the other day. Yeah, my apologies. I couldn't make that, so it's wonderful to meet you. So and we also have David Hawkins, who you may remember spoke with us a week or so ago, former Mayor of Papakura. So it's lovely to see you in the flesh. So I think we've got just going around the room, that's everybody. And the last person for you, I'll invite Steph to introduce Carl.
Yeah, kia ora, ni Susan. Tēnā koutou e te manuhiri. Manuhiri. Thanks, guys, for all, and girls, ladies, for all coming today. We feel like we've got the A team in the house. So thank you very much for coming. But it's my pleasure to introduce Carl Tucker, who's quietly sitting in the background there. So Carl has kindly agreed to come on and support Waipa, and particularly Dawn and I, but the executive leadership team and yourselves as elected members in terms of the complexity of the water space we've got going, and helping provide strategic advice to us as we move forward with these decisions. So Carl, I think we'll probably get some of the folks to introduce themselves. Marlon, you might want to introduce yourself, but and there's connections in the room, which there always are, 1 degree of separation in New Zealand, but Carl comes with exceptional reference in terms of being the Commercial Partnerships Director at Watercare and recently the Infrastructure Funding and Finance Manager for Kāinga Ora, and previous to that was in the NTU for a while there, Carl, as well, working through that phase. So would you like to just introduce yourself and then we'll come back to the table? Would you like to come up here and just, sorry to put you on the spot, but it just might be a nice while you're here in person.
Steph's pretty much run through my CV. So for those of you I haven't met and shaken hands with, Carl Tucker, significant background in water, having done 8 years at Watercare, and was engaged in the arrangement that Watercare entered into with Waikato District Council, both in 2014 when we provided water and wastewater services to Pokeno and Tuakau, but also the more recent arrangements in regard to service delivery, taking over the arrangements in the Waikato District through that period. And as Steph said, most recently working with Kāinga Ora, Auckland Council and Porirua City Council around how we funded and financed a relatively large infrastructure program to enable growth and regeneration of brownfields areas in Auckland and Porirua. And really looking forward to working with everyone at the table and the organisation on this piece of work, because there are some challenges, but also some really significant opportunities. So really looking forward to that.
And welcome on board.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great.
Welcome to St. Leo's.
Great stuff. Hey, look, just in the interests, now we all know who you are. Maybe I'm assuming you sort of in part know most of the people in the room, but maybe if just the councillors could introduce themselves just quickly, so for a whistle stop tour, because we may not all be known. I'm Susan. I'm the mayor, just in case you realise that one. But Liz, can I ask? We'll go around that way, just so you know who we all are.
Yeah, kia ora everybody, Liz Stolwick, Cambridge Ward Councillor and Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Mike Montgomery, everyone calls me Monty here. I'm Mangatautari Ward Councillor.
Kia ora koutou, Claire St Pierre, Pirongia Kakapuku Ward Councillor.
Marcus Te Amadou Kiki Ward Councillor. Tēnā koutou, Mike Pettit, Cambridge Ward Councillor.
Philip Coles, Cambridge Councillor. Welcome.
Tēnā tātou, ka Daumre Morgan ahau, I'm the Māori Ward for Waipa. Tēnā koutou.
What's on? Andrew Brown, Te Awamutu Ward Councillor.
And Roger online.
Yeah, I'm Roger Gordon, Cambridge Ward Councillor.
Fantastic. So we're sort of spread across the district, obviously. Some of us have been here for a while, some of us have been here a lot longer and others are reasonably new. But this is a piece of work, obviously, which is pretty central to this term for us all. And as Calvin was saying, it's a great, it's an honour for the party to take part in something that could have such long-lasting and far-reaching generational impact. So just in that context, and before I hand over fully, Marlon, could I ask you to just describe your current role so we can get a bit of idea around what that is before I hand over to you properly?
Thank you, Mayor. So my name is Marlon Bridge. I'm the Chief Technical Officer at DIA, working within Local Water Done Well on behalf of the government, working directly with the Minister Mr Brown on what's his thoughts are and how we should move this forward. Just by way of background, I've been in the water industry coming up to 20 years. First time I came into the water industry, I helped set up Manukau Water Limited as a CCO within Manukau City Council. I then did the integration of the Super City in 2010, establishing water care. And so it's sort of natural for me to be sitting here helping councils to try and find the next configuration of what the water industry looks like. So pleased to be here and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Great stuff. Now, we do have the memorandum that staff have provided us, and obviously the heads of agreement itself. So if I can then pass over to you, Vaughan, and we're all yours.
Tūtahi mihana kia koe me Susan o te rai kia koutou katoa ngā kaikaunihira o Waipa, kia koe hoki Steph, me ngā kaimahi katoa o te kaunihira nei tēnā tātou. Thank you for the warm welcome again, and nice to be here. I should probably start off by acknowledging that we've just come from Matamata Piako District Council. They wanted us to deliver a message to Waipa District Council to say that while it was a workshop and they're having a formal council meeting next week to communicate that in principle they've agreed to sign the heads of agreement and to go straight to stage 2 as opposed to being a stage 1 council. So they just wanted you to know that. Secondly, just to probably 2 overall messages. Firstly, to acknowledge the leadership that this requires. You know, it's not easy to make waters work, and we've seen how it can unravel at a national level, and therefore it just makes sense to have local ownership of the problem and the solution going forward, and therefore acknowledge the importance of leadership and the leadership that Waipa District Council is showing to the rest of the region, and to acknowledge Steph, Dawn and others fronting up to our 7:30 Wednesday morning meetings for the last 6 weeks to co-design what a water entity could look like. And in that regard, what we've come up with is a design that doesn't mean that any council is handing their business over to a CCO and you never see them again. What we've designed is something that requires an enduring relationship to be established between the council and the CCO, with guardrails around making sure that your expectations are delivered on, that there's accountability mechanisms locked in, as well as not a one-on-one relationship, but you're able to form those relationships with other shareholders as well, and creating space for a partnership conversation with iwi once we know which councils are fully committed to this model, because it's quite hard for iwi to engage fully when councils haven't fully committed themselves to a particular model. So those are the probably two overriding points. But to crack on, and I know that just want to check on time, how much time we have.
We have until 2:30 in our calendars, folks. Vaughan tells me that this discussion has taken well more than an hour in other councils because the conversation is good and grunty. So I'm not sure how you're all placed, but we'll aim to get to 2:30 and then check in whether we need a little bit more time. Obviously, these some of our visitors have got a journey back to Auckland afterwards, but we'll see how we're going at 2:30 if that's okay, and whether we've had enough time to work through the questions and discussion. Does that sound about right, Vaughan?
Yep, thank you. Yeah,
Kia ora.
sort of takes about an hour and a half, I think, is what our experience here. And we don't want to stifle the conversation. We want good conversation to occur. So, so just want to go through how we've got to this point, talk about the heads of agreement, what we consider are the strategic reasons to maintain a commitment to a regional model, and then look at timeframes, milestones, and what it might mean financially in terms of a ongoing or a further commitment to the next phase. So importantly, in working together, the councils, and this is also with the iwi chairs, have agreed on what we're trying to achieve together. So a vision of te mana o te wai, te mana o te tangata, healthy water, healthy people. Now, there are some questions about why that doesn't talk about te ture whaimana, you know, for the Waikato River, the vision for the Waikato. It's because te ture whaimana doesn't apply to the whole of the Waikato. And so we're having to broaden it out to te mana o te wai, which therefore we can cover the West Coast harbours and other water bodies outside the Waikato River catchment, including in fact Lake Taupo, te ture whaimana doesn't apply to. And then I think I've shared with this to you before, previously you've adopted this in principle. What are we trying to achieve in terms of strategic outcomes? So I'll keep moving. You heard from Michael Brewster 3 or 4 weeks ago, the ex-chief executive of Taswater, and just wanted to summarise what he said. He talked about the benefits of scale being real in his experience, but that the main risks in aggregating services is over-promising, not communicating enough, and not having the trust between the parties, and therefore need to focus on those relationships and being careful not to overpromise as we go through this journey. The challenge to around benefit realisation, and that fact that to get the benefits requires an investment upfront. The benefits won't just flow, but that there are returns. And you've previously heard from Gavin Iron, the CEO of Waikato District, who talked about spending $4 million to join Watercare, but they got returns within 2 years of that investment. The importance of leadership and trust, which we've talked about, to focus on those things that really matter and don't get caught up in the detail. So knowing what the critical factors are for success, and that the public will remain skeptical until tangible benefits are understood. So I think we all understand this, but just good to reinforce some of those key messages from Michael. So we've co-designed a CCO that focuses on delivering those strategic outcomes. At the same time, you'll recall all the work we've done over the last year, identifying what are local concerns that need to be addressed as we move forward. And can I acknowledge that this has been an 18-month journey since the iwi chairs invited the mayors of the region to the Novotel to say, do you want to work together on a Waikato solution, or do you want to sit back and let Wellington tell us what to do? So there's a lot of investment that's gone into this model. I think you understand why a heads of agreement is needed, and in effect, it's to give you an option that you can evaluate to inform the next phase, which is public consultation on options. And out of that public consultation, you can land on a delivery model that you can build into your water services delivery plan due in September next year. The heads of agreement, this are the key matters that it addresses, and I think we have slides relating to each of these. But firstly, if you can see that, and I will invite Sinead to speak to it because only she explains this much better than I do in terms of the relationship between the shareholders and the CCO that we're building into the model.
Thanks, Vaughan, and thank you, councillors. So this slide is actually taken from the DIA guidance. So it's an illustrative example of the relationships between the shareholder and the board. So the option that we had highlighted in the previous slide was a multi-council owned CCO. With this, you can see what's anticipated is a number of councils would obviously be the owners of shares in the entity. It's envisaged that initially all shareholders will own shares equally. Once councils start transferring their business into the council, sorry, this feels quite awkward. I'm going to lean in a bit more. Stage 2 shares get issued as businesses get transferred into the CCO, and the allocation of stage 2 shares will be done on the basis of connections. So the numbers that we have are indicative numbers at the moment across the 9 councils, but I believe WIPA is sitting at about 16% at the moment. What does that mean in terms of, so each shareholder would appoint a representative to a forum called the Shareholder Representative Forum in the Heads of Agreement. It's called a Shareholder Council here. The purpose of the representative is to really be the conduit through which the council engages with the board of the CCO and obviously with the other shareholders. The default position that we have in the heads of agreement is that the mayor would be the representative on that forum for each council, but obviously each council would decide who the appropriate person is at any point in time. The intention would be that that forum will make decisions on behalf of the shareholders. So I just want to be quite clear that when I say they make decisions, they will have 2 categories. There may be some things that they're delegated authority to make decisions in their own right, and that's something that would obviously be agreed by the shareholders themselves. There's other matters that would obviously bring back to their full council, get the council's position on that, and then bring it back to the forum and cast their votes as their council has authorised them to do so. One of the key decisions that the shareholder forum would make is the appointment of the board. And Vaughan will go through the decisions that have been made in relation to the number of directors and the competencies that the CEs believe are necessary for this entity to be successful. Probably the key document that's up here at the moment is the Statement of Expectations. So we know from the DAIA guidance that legislation is going to require that there's a combined Statement of Expectations that the shareholders agree to, that will set out what their priorities are, the strategic direction that they want, and various other mandatory content. That will be one statement of expectations, and it really informs and guides the decisions of the board. So it's quite a powerful document. In the accountability framework that's coming through, the board will be required to prepare a water services strategy. That water services strategy has to set out how they are or how they will respond to the statement of expectation. So there's a 2-way dialogue being introduced through the legislation, which will be quite powerful in terms of holding the board to account. And then, as we said here, there is the board itself, which will be responsible for the operational and financial decisions. The Constitution, just looking at this, we have a purpose. I think it's clause 3 of the Heads of Agreement sets out what the purpose of the water services CCO would be. But obviously that's subject also to what legislation will require. And we know that there will be certain statutory objectives that will be imposed upon such an organisation as well. So it's
Thanks, Sinead. And probably a point I should have made at the start was while the chief executives have co-designed a CCO that's reflected in the heads of agreement, the fact that we've still got to go through public consultation, you will have your own feedback on different elements. It is still subject to change before that co-design, that entity will be reflected in formal governance documentation. So I see this as an opportunity to refine and improve the model that's been co-designed to date. So heads of agreement content. So a limited liability company, the purpose is to deliver on that vision, the strategic outcomes that each council's agreed in principle to. Councils own the company, as we've said, and Sinead's talked about everyone having equal shareholding until the point that you've put your water business into the CCO, then the shareholder mix will change, particularly if you're a stage 2 shareholder. And what do shares mean? There's no dividend, they can't be sold or transferred. The main benefit of a share is influence, having the ability to influence the direction of the company and to hold it to account, which is this point here. I think we're pretty familiar with stage 1, stage 2, councils or shareholders and influence. We've talked about the shareholder representative forum that is there to enable the CCO to engage with each shareholder through the mayor, but there'll be particular decisions that the mayor needs to take back to each council to get a mandate. The importance of the statement of expectations, as Sinead said, there will be some mandatory requirements in the statement of expectations. One of those, from memory, relates to the importance of giving effect to any treaty settlement obligations that are relevant to the management of water, but there will be other mandatory ones, and then, of course, some optional matters that you can put into the statement of expectations. And in terms of directors, as Sinead says, it's a competency-based board. We've come up a skills matrix in Schedule 7 of the heads of agreement, and that the role of the board really is to act in the best interests of the company. And that might be a discussion point. It's been raised now and again that whether the role of the board should be to act in the best interests of the shareholders as opposed to the company. And Marlon might have a view on this around if you do want true independence and you want to maximise the borrowing ability of the board, you might actually want it to act in the best interest of the company versus the shareholder. I don't know if you've got a view on this, Marlon?
Yeah, well, my view probably won't agree completely with what you're saying, Paul. But I mean, in terms of, if I talk about Watercare's history, it's been fully independent all through its history, and it's been able to make decisions that are in the best interest of the company, but whilst representing the shareholder, which I still think is a subtle way of saying they were still doing what the shareholder wanted ultimately. But I sit here and go, ultimately, your council has a choice to make. You know, pre 1 July 25, you can currently set up a CCO and have councillors on the board. Legislation will then say from 1 July 25, you can't. So there's still a choice available. I'm trying to make sure everyone fully understands there are a number of options available to councils. So yes, if control is the issue, then influence can be gained in other ways. But right now, the legislation is pointing towards no councillor involvement on it. But I'm saying it's a bill. It will be there for submission. If that's something of concern, then please write in. Vaughan is 100% correct in that it currently says independent directors gives you access to financing, but that's just a discussion with S&P as to how we could accommodate if there is a different situation. So yes, I hear what you're saying, but I'm trying to give full and frank information.
Thanks, Marlon. Iwi partner involvement, and this is something that's been a priority for the chief executives, and as I've said before, it's quite challenging for iwi who don't know which councils are committed to the CCO, therefore how much time and energy do they put into this? So we've arrived at is that the shareholder representative forum, well, at that point when it's formed, we know which councils are involved and therefore which iwi to engage with to really understand how that forum could effectively engage with iwi and what a partnership model might look like. At the same time, while that longer term relationship is worked out, the shareholder forum needs to appoint a board, and so the heads of agreement talks about engaging pretty quickly with iwi chairs to ensure that those chairs have assurance around how the competency relating to Te Ao Māori and Tikanga Māori is going to be delivered on at a board level. And we, from memory, haven't limited that competency to one board member. And then transition planning, we know this is really important. In essence, we believe that given that it's critical that we look after staff, it's critical that we all understand what day one needs to look like. So if that's 1 July 2026, it's important that all the councils agree what it looks like for customers, what it looks like for staff, what it looks like for billing, what it looks like for technology. Getting that day one, that experience and outcomes clearly defined enables us to work backwards and go, what's the transition plan to deliver on those day one expectations? And you might see later on that the board needs to take that transition plan to the shareholder forum and get it signed off. I don't think we can wait till the board's in place. I think once we know which councils are in the tent, that transition planning should start. So we're anticipating, subject to public consultation, that we need to get on with that transition planning as quickly as possible to give everybody confidence that we're going to land council's business safely in the CCO. I think we've talked previously about what stage functional services are, and I've talked briefly about what day one operationally needs to look like, and the fact that we just need to sit down and agree what that needs to look like. And then coming back to those local concerns or showstoppers, and the way that we framed this was if we turned up to Waipa District Council with a really good business case to set up a multi-council owned CCO, you might go, well, that's fine, but we've got some local concerns that aren't addressed. So we identified those local concerns or showstoppers and just want to work through how the heads of agreement has addressed those. So price equalisation, other names for that are cross-subsidisation or price harmonisation. We've had feedback that perhaps price equalisation is the best term to use. Wanted to make the point that this, while we all assume it's going to happen one day, that it is optional. It's not a requirement that it occurs, and that we believe it's an important conversation because it can be quite contentious between communities. Hey, we're subsidising that community and vice versa, that this is owned between the board and the shareholder forum, and if need be, the councils, to make sure there's an agreement on what that price pathway looks like. If it means that price equalisation doesn't occur for the first 5 years, 10 years, that's really up to the shareholders because it's your company. But we really wanted to take the time to make sure that there's confidence, if it's going to happen, that there's agreement on how it happens and over what time frame.
And the Comcom would have a role in that too, wouldn't they? I would expect they'd have an oversight role. Marlon, do you want to perhaps talk to that?
Yeah, I don't think I've come across many councillors that fully understand the implications of regulation and how intrusive it is. Because there are a number of councils around the country just talking about, we're just going to do a SABU, which is a standalone business unit within council. And what I explained to them is, without all the regular agreements supporting how costs are charged to that particular ring-fenced division, the Comcom will look at the whole council. They will regulate the whole council in order to make an opinion on what the water charges are and how that should operate. So stepping back to what it means in terms of a CCO that's set up, well, it'll have full independence and the agreements will all be in place. So if you're as close to a SABU, you might as well take the next logical step and create the CCO. Whether there's multi-CCOs or not, I think you're going to see that Comcom will be a little bit more lenient on that because they'll understand the pressure with setting that up, but ultimately they'll have a strong say on what the best outcome for customers is or ratepayers are in terms of the service they receive and the cost they're paying for that. And they'll have a strong say in that as you get through multiple regulatory interventions.
And I think from my understanding, what Comcom will be concerned about to make sure that the costs that have been charged to the customer are fair and reasonable and so on. But at this stage, there's no definition about whether it's customers at what level, whether it's local, regional, sub-regional, and so on. And so that decision, as far as we're concerned, sits with the CCO to determine where that price equalisation, what level it can occur at.
Thanks for the question. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm quite concerned about that naturally. And I see that the shareholding for stage 2 is based on number of connections. Yeah, and so you could argue that even though you, in an ideal world, you know, you'd like a robust conversation with individual councils saying what they'd like an outcome for their communities. But in the shareholder voting situation, you could easily get just a couple of councils having quite a substantial majority, and therefore those players sort of overriding the wishes of smaller councils or a smaller block. Yeah, so was there any consideration given to other ways of allocating shares? Like another interesting thing for Waipa is that, sure, we're a smaller council, but we've got very productive water systems because of our industrial users. Yeah, and so you could argue that the quantity of water that we're processing through our systems, is far more than just a typical formula that would use residential connections.
Yeah, and I'll ask Sinead to go through the options that we've considered before we arrived at connections, but I think every council's got that situation of either industrial users with, say, 1 connection or 2 connections, but even Hauraki District Council, where they provide a lot of water to farmers who are using big volumes, but have only got 1 connection. So there's no one perfect system of allocating shares. The main conclusion we arrived at is that we need to arrive at something that's fairly simple and fair, but also recognise that what does a share actually give you? And a share really just gives you influence. And therefore, even on equal price equalisation, we're saying, well, why would we try and design a system and force price equalisation we want the shareholders to own the decision and the pathway. Let's let the board have that conversation with the shareholders at the right time. But Sinead, do you want to talk through the shareholding options we went through?
Maybe I should let you speak to it, Steph. Yeah, you're quite right. There's a number of different options, and one that was looked at was the value of assets being contributed. But I think if you look at it from a kind of an overall, and this is what we discussed with the CEs, was you want something that remains current. So with the number of connections, the shares are allocated on the basis of the number of connections as a council comes across. That is then reviewed every time a new shareholder comes across into stage 2. So the number of shares that you have would be updated to reflect the current. And if someone outside a non-participating council in the heads of agreement decides that they want to be admitted later, and Vaughan will speak to the admission process for new shareholders, that again triggers a review of the connections. And then finally, there is the default where the shareholders would, they can waive it, but a mechanism to review the connections every 5 years. So the idea of that is to remain as current as possible. If you were to have an asset allocation as the means of allocating shares, that becomes a very expensive exercise to do that, to keep it current in that particular way. And obviously it gets quite confusing then as new assets are created that belong to the CCO. So it really started from a principal discussion as to what you want to achieve as a shareholder. And as Vaughan said, that started with, if you can't have a dividend and you can't sell it and you can't transfer it, what does it give you? And it gives you influence at the table, and influence is for the benefit of the communities that you represent, and therefore connections is probably the most equitable way of identifying that. So that was in a nutshell. I'm simplifying quite lengthy discussions, but in a nutshell, that was the thought process. Would you agree, Steph?
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to the principle of, and I've been really impressed, super impressed in the conversations with the CE group, that everybody recognises that everybody's got something that's unique for their context, whatever that is, and that no one wants to go into this feeling like anybody's going to get run over or left behind or too far out the front, and that councils need to be able to share with their community that our interests will be protected, and how that relates to our placemaking patterns, or particular issues or upgrade of our water systems, whatever that looks like, whatever's important to us, that's fully able to be lent into and listened to and heard in that space. And that's why the Shareholders Representative Forum, and why we think the mayors are really important to be there, because they have the voice and mandate of their community. But the board, equally the board and the CE, are responsible for individual relationships with councils, but through that mechanism. And that's why we spoke at length around finding the mechanism that we all felt was fairest and most reasonable. It was lengthy, Claire. The best of spirit.
A distributional question relating to growth. And I'm probably thinking a few years down the track when you've got a multi-council CCO, you may or may not have price harmonisation, but you've got decisions to make about allocation of scarce capital, which is going to facilitate population growth, therefore economic growth. And it's not water care. You're not all one city. You've got a bunch of different councils. So when I read this, I was thinking about that and thinking, is that going to be handled at the shareholder council level, or is it going to be handled at the board level, at where those distributional kind of decisions are made? Because it's going to directly drive economic growth into different district councils. And I was thinking, I mean, the board could do it, but it's essentially a political decision. The shareholders council could do it, but potentially it's a total shit show, in that space. And I was just wondering, I sort of read that how the heads of agreement design addresses it, and I'm not sure I see it, and maybe it's further down the track.
So you're referring to the investment prioritisation framework of the board about how it goes about its work and where it invests?
No, I'm particularly talking about growth. So let's fast forward a few years, and we're all still growing like crazy, and our water services are becoming our constraint. And we're required to have 20% above high growth forecast available. And other councils may or may not. And this board is being faced with this quite tough decision about where to allocate its scarce capital, like to build a new wastewater treatment plant somewhere or whatever. So it's that. And this might be 10, 15, 20 years away, but it just, when I read it, I was like, well, that seems to me like the biggest potential sort of conflict point in this, given you've got multi-councils. It's not Auckland City, it's not Watercare, where kind of not a problem. So there's my question. Do you understand it?
I think it's going to require a couple of us to, because there is a national context here in terms of principles like growth paying for growth as well. But I think, so how we've designed this is that the board needs to come up with an investment prioritisation framework, get that framework agreed by the shareholder forum, but ultimately it's up to the board to make those investment decisions. And I can foresee that making sure that there's compliance across the board would probably be the biggest priority. And that's why we also think that, if we talk about catchment consenting later on, we do think that there's a lot of money being invested in compliance that isn't necessarily the best return on investment if you take a whole of river view. And so we could probably reduce the overall compliance cost by being more strategic than is currently possible based on a plant or council by council approach. But having said that, if compliance is dealt with, then if you look at growth and maintenance and renewals and things like that, but if you look at growth, there will be policies around, and where I might lean on Marlon in terms of government's expectations about who pays for growth going forward and how much discretion exists locally on those matters. But it is about the board making those decisions, but at the same time having discussions with the shareholder and making sure that there is effective input from the shareholder in terms of the asset management plans, the funding of those asset management plans. They've got to come up with a water strategy that's like a long-term plan and consulted on like a long-term plan and things like that. But got any feedback as well?
Yeah, look, I would probably talk about the most strategic document that you'll produce as part of this process, which is the Water Service Delivery Plan. And as long as the intent is clear in there, then you should give the entity the right focus as it moves forward. So I hear you on the comment around 15 years out or 10 years out. I think initially your problems won't be around scarce capital, because you'll have sufficient debt capacity within a combination of various entities. It'll probably be more about capital scarce delivery, because you'll struggle to deliver what you need to, because contracting market just doesn't exist today for what you'll need to address all the issues in the region. So for me, I think there is some element of the Water Service Delivery Plan. The councillors should have a strong view on what they see as priorities in that. But then more regularly, it'll be on the statement of expectations, where you set the direction on what you think this entity should be doing, but leaving it then to the board and management to try and address those concerns. So they can be differing objectives. It doesn't need to be an overall Waikato picture or Bay of Plenty picture or whatever the entities end up being, but it can be about what's really important for Waipa, and that can evolve over time. So I think you'll have a strong opportunity to have a lot of say in this, and obviously there are also avenues when you start talking about just the political connections within these entities and how you'll be able to influence at that level.
Just can I pick up on 2 points in that? The statement of expectations is going to be a collective coming out of the shareholders group or whatever, like shareholders council. So the Water Service Delivery Plan, which we're currently working on for Waipa, will cease to exist later on. We're not going to carry on with our own water service delivery plans.
No.
So
it'll be initially that, and then it'll be a funding and asset management plan document. Water strategy.
Yeah, I still think there's real potential scope for competition amongst councils that I haven't exactly got a good way of dealing with, but I just was wondering if there could be some design potentially And it might be too early. It might be later on that we think about that.
Yeah, just to add to that, what we're seeing around the country is everyone's got the same sort of concern, but when they see the numbers and the actual amount of capital that's available to deal with issues in your region, in particular council areas, it's actually more than what is here now. So it's not a matter of what should we focus on, it's how we're going to deliver it becomes more of a challenge once we uncover the full combination of the entities and what that means.
And final point on it from me, if you don't chase price harmonisation too hard, the problem kind of goes away, because it means you can have slightly differential sort of programs being funded by those particular people. If a particular district wants to keep going for it,
yeah,
they can pay for it.
Right.
And if we can accommodate that, because I was always working under the assumption that we would be striving quite hard for price harmonisation, but maybe it's not, you don't have to.
And again, it might be the board. The board might want to drive hard for price equalisation, but it's got to be with the shareholders, is how we've designed it.
I think, sorry, just to answer a little bit of that question, Vaughan's view that, you need to keep it simple is really, really important. As you set this thing up, don't make it too complex, just get it really working effectively as simply as you can. But, what I'm saying to a lot of councils around the country is go into any arrangement on your terms. There's nothing stopping you from saying, I want to keep our prices. There's nothing stopping you from saying we want to maintain our debt. Sure, there's some level of inefficiency created with that, and Wellington Water is a great example of where that's really constrained its operations, right? So, I'm just saying, if that's something that's really important to you, there are some really strong sacred cows that you want to hold on to. There's nothing stopping you from negotiating that into the position that you start this relationship with.
Yeah, thanks. Marlon, I just wanted to pick up on the statements you made about contractor, I suppose, capacity. With your experience with Watercare, did you find that capacity did sort of step up to meet the larger scale that was sort of expected? Or
Yeah, that's a really good question. It took time, because you have to have a clear pathway on what you're trying to achieve. There's no point just saying we've got, we have $3 billion over 10 years and now we've got $6 billion. Let's go for it. Yeah. You've sort of got to work in conjunction with those contractors and really share that pipeline with the market so that they can get a indication of what you're trying to do and then tell you the best way to deliver it, because they're actually really good at what they do. And sometimes we take this holier than thou view on what we think is the right way forward. But actually they are very good at delivering stuff really cheaply if you give them the opportunity. So our models at Watercare evolved over time. They weren't perfect, but we managed to go from $250 million per year in 2010 to over $1 billion a year later. 10 years later, sorry.
Yeah. And so, and of course, we're really conscious that we're not in Auckland City, we're a provincial area. Do you think that there would be contractor interested at that larger scale to come and work here? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Right now, they are struggling for work. This is the best opportunity to get things done in the history of New Zealand in terms of contracting works, and yet we're all slowing down because we're trying to figure out what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right now is the best time. You'll never get a cheaper price than today.
Oh, okay. And then the last question was really about, one of the great things that we've been able to do at Waipa is kind of like an anchor institution approach. We're sort of prioritizing local people, as contractors. So I'm a bit worried that we might lose that if we go into this entity. How could we manage? Could you give us some advice about whether or not there's scope to sort of try and look after our local contractors? Is that going to be counterintuitive to trying to get the best price? What are your comments?
No, you're exactly thinking the right way. Because when we talk about how we should deliver things, the most important thing is the standardization. Who does it is irrelevant. So you can keep your small contractors, you can introduce large contractors, but as long as they're doing it in a consistent manner that meets health and safety standards and whatever else it is that you think are important, you can absolutely get every benefit from a single person to 1,000+ entity.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. It's great. Thank you.
That's reassuring. Mike Peter.
Claire had my question really. The only supplementary was Mike's comment about if a council wanted to sort of go alone a little bit and deal with growth that maybe the governance board didn't want to sort of deal with. The only problem there is you sort of you can be fighting against yourself, possibly with, I thought maybe a lack of capacity around the contractors, but what you're saying is if you bring them on board early, you know, because I think we're talking about $5 billion worth of work or something over 10 years, bring them on early. And I think also it's just redefining what's local. Local is going to be the CCO. Local is not going to be Waipa. That's how I'd sort of rationalise that.
To that too, Mike, because one of the things that's really come to my mind or come to my realisation, particularly here, is at what Dom refers to as the Manhattan skyline, right? And so at the moment we've got, what did that $5 billion worth of work, right, for 10 years, but contractors don't know really what's in front of them more than about 18 months out. If we can say, right, guys, we've got work for 5 years, pretty much put up competitive bids, you've got work, you'll find the efficiencies are found. If there's, you know, current standard industry agreements about, right, if it's a big player or you've got to have subcontractors that come from this area, here's how we're going to measure what that looks like. But to be able to drive those efficiencies by smoothing out that Manhattan skyline, giving companies confidence and removing the risk for them to invest in equipment, plant, people, training, good health and safety practices, whatever it is, that's one of the best things we could do from an anchor institution framework, Claire, is to give our contractors confidence that they're going to have work for a longer period of time, which is one of the I think the real advantages of what we're talking about. And for iwi particularly, we've already had one hui with Waikato Tainui owned contractors, right? A lot of those are still coming to the market. We've got more than we anticipated. If we start to talk with other iwi, and this is the key interest point that we've heard from iwi, is they're keen to grow from an education and employment perspective. So if they can get into the market and grow their businesses, they're not going anywhere. They're not about to move elsewhere. If they can get here, grow businesses, enhance their own economy, that's a fantastic outcome. It's a win-win, right? So that's what we want to keep driving, and it's something that we've been talking about at the CE Forum.
So just only one more point, I think, on the local influence part of the slide is the default is decision-making by consensus, or the goal is consensus decision-making. But the fallback at stage 2 is to have a two-tier system where you look at 75% of the shareholder votes and then 75% of the number of shareholders. And that partially deals with the issue you raised, Claire, around smaller shareholders and not having just not looking at shareholder votes, but looking at number of shareholders to help make decisions as well.
Could I just... Yeah, thanks. And in fact, I think the Mayor of Papakura made a good point about that, in your presentation to us, about having a shareholders' council, Yeah, that's very, very important
as a small council. I mean, we only had 3.7% shareholding, and the 75% was a backstop there, but it was only used twice or three times in the whole time.
I think in the heads of agreement, it's a bit unclear as to which forum would be used, whether it's a basis of the stage 2, you know, where it's a basis of connections for voting, or if it's the shareholders, but I'm sure that'll be clearer. The reason I wanted to talk about this, though, is I have a problem with local voice being equated to individual council, because I'm really keen on a mechanism being reflected in the heads of agreement that's going to cater for consumer voice or user voice, because that came through strongly in some of the other work that I was involved in with water entities, that you've got to demonstrate that people that aren't happy are going to be able to get the message through, and that you've got really good mechanisms to resolve those issues for them in a good time frame. So I felt that just defaulting to the councils will be able to tell people what's happening, but I do think it's important to have that, and like resolving disputes at a consumer level.
So the optional matters for the statement of expectations would include what do you expect in terms of resolution of any complaints that are raised by customers. So all of that can be addressed within the statement of expectations.
And just to add to that, from a ComCom perspective, no offence to the council, but they don't care about the council voice, they care about the consumer voice.
So in terms of service delivery scope and standards, category of local concerns. So we've heard the point that some councils want to go straight to stage 2, that stage 1 doesn't suit, and so that in effect is becoming a more popular option amongst councils. And so that's how the heads of agreement has dealt with that issue. Stormwater will be a management service at the outset at the option of councils. Distributional impacts highlighted the importance of a transition plan that includes principles around pricing, that deals with investment prioritisation framework. But I think the main focus of the transition plan in the early start is making sure that we're doing the basics well on day one, that there is no disruption of service, that customers don't notice any difference between the council on one day and the CCO on the next day, looking after staff, having basic systems in place and so on. And I might turn to Sinead to talk about historical underinvestment, because that's probably one of the, what I call the big three. The big three concerns have been around pricing, they've been around local voice and things like, hey, what about our neighbours? They haven't invested as much as we have, and we don't want to be so cross-subsidising them.
Yeah, so clauses 10.12 and 10.13 of the heads of agreement deal with what's proposed. I suppose in terms of background, as we know, the water services delivery plans are going to have all councils state what the current state of their assets is, and that will identify what any underinvestment, or should identify what any underinvestment is, and also what is the pathway to addressing that. If it is in the context of a CCO, there obviously is the issue for other councils as to why should we take on someone else's problem. So we did a lot of discussion and thinking with the CEs in relation to that. And the thought initially was that it should be something for the board to address, but we engaged at quite lengthy or at length with Michael Brewster, who you guys have had the benefit of having a presentation from. And his view was historic underinvestment shouldn't be dealt with at the board level, because it puts the board in a position where it's essentially against the shareholders, and that's not what you want in terms of promoting success. So what we've put forward is that the shareholder forum will work with the board to address how historic underinvestment will be addressed. It's going to be quite fact dependent, but the water services delivery plans should, I suppose, bring to light what is that underinvestment. And one of the principles that the CEs agreed be included is that the lack of water meters would be treated as historic underinvestment, and it would be for that particular community to address that. How is something that would be worked through once it's clear as to what the scope of that is.
And can I just add to that, Claire, because I think that goes to the heart of what do you really need to know as elected members and have confidence in before you can make a decision or establish a CCO of choice. And it's we don't need perfect information on everything. One of those is the asset state of the councils. There's going to have to be enough to put forward a water services plan to share that information. But as we say, there will be mechanisms that aren't at play now that will be in play to start to address some of those issues. So they're great questions.
I'd just like to see some clarity on the stormwater thing if we go straight to the stage 2 option, because if that's an asset owning one, does that mean the stormwater assets go across?
No.
No. Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm a bit confused about that, because I think
Yeah.
if this regional CCO is going to be asset owning, I just assumed that it would also be stormwater assets.
So Vaughan, am I wrong in saying that this is a conversation of great importance to us as rural and provincial councils? And in fact, I'm sure she won't mind, but Lorraine Kendrick, and Carl's in the room. So we've now got 2 Carls in the water team. So we seem to be accommodating similar names. That when Lorraine was here, she spent an inordinate amount of her time on rural stormwater and drainage issues, right? And I'm sure it's the same for Hauraki or Turahanga. So the stormwater aspect, and looking at Dawn, because she'll tell me if I'm wrong, is really important. And that's something we might want to create a contract for service option for with the CCO, where again, we can drive efficiencies. It can still be place-based against, placemaking thing, all those sorts of things. But it's something that we should consider if it's the Waikato Waters Done Well model we go to, because that's an issue, obviously, which is probably less important for the metro, but very important for rural councils. And it's something that we're open all to have a conversation about. But I'll pass that Rako back to you, Vaughan Marlin.
Yeah, well, I can add something because I think stormwater is being questioned around the country. It's not just in the Waikato, but majority of coming to that conclusion where because of all the consenting requirements and the inability to charge effectively for it, apart from through a tax, a rate, then a lot of them are saying we should just do contract for service. And they will get the efficiencies of, 2 waters and then an additional service. So
is this something that's going to be discussed a bit more before?
And I think it's one of those transition plan matters.
Yeah, okay.
We have a focus on stormwater. How's it going to look on day one? What does the council want for its stormwater services on day one? And then work backwards from that.
It might be something we canvass with the CEs who are starting to indicate interest, right? That we have that conversation visibly and figure out how that's forming up. More purposefully.
This is a real cross-boundary issue too, because when I was at the regional council and we were looking at drainage, rural drainage, and you get an area like Hamilton that's intensifying, that water ends up in those rural drains, and so you've got to make sure that there's conversation with Hamilton in this case, that they've got detention ponds and all sorts of things to make sure that the farmers aren't getting flooded downstream as Hamilton grows. So it's a real cross-boundary issue, which, and I know that I've got a bias, but it makes a multi-council owned CCO makes sense.
Sorry, Andrew. The only point I was going to make is that the legislation will enable stormwater to be optional, and we did have quite a lengthy discussion at the CE forum in relation to it. However, I suppose the balanced decision was let's just have it stormwater management at the outset, find out what the legislation says, find out how the optionality works, do a little bit of scenario testing. So there is scope, I suppose, to go to 3 waters at a later point in time, but 2 waters plus stormwater management was seen as the safest transition step.
Andrew.
I'm thinking that we're expecting legislation to do something about the rural drainage issue, give some teeth to make private owners deal with it adequately. Is that right or no?
No, not that I'm aware, but it could certainly be part of your submission.
So the last thing on this slide relates to transitional issues, of which there are lots, highlighted the importance of starting to prepare that transition plan as soon as possible to identify all the risks, make sure there's a good plan in place to mitigate those risks. The other point I think is this is going to cost money, and I'm not talking about cost to customers, but ultimately it's a cost to customers, but establishing a CCO will cost money. And this probably again might be where Marlin kicks in, but there is going to be a cost anyway in terms of standalone ring fence in your business, dealing with economic regulation and the like. And so the more the cost is shared amongst councils and ultimately customers, the better. But Marlon might have a view in terms of the cost side of things.
Look, I've set up 5 CCOs now, and none of them were relatively cheap, to be honest. But I think you can, if you continue with the path of simplicity, you'll get a really cheap outcome through. So, I've helped set up a couple of CCOs down the line with other councils to get them transparent and ready for a, future conversation around an integrated entity. And we've done it with, the GM infrastructure as the CE acting and the CE as the chair and one councillor. It costs nothing to do that, but it enabled us to start finding the transparency around I'm not saying that you would do that because you're probably a lot larger than this council, but it's how long is a piece of string is the conversation. And I think if you look at the real value and the benefits you're likely to achieve, then you'll make the investment.
So just turning to the, why might you want to sign this heads of agreement? What's the strategic reasons? So there is scale in the regional model without Hamilton. So we're looking at 64% of the region's population over the last 5 years, growth of 3 to 13.7%. I think Waipa was number 2, Waikato District was number 1 in terms of that growth, compared to a national average of just over 2%. In terms of number of water connections, that's excluding stormwater, 63% of the region and 70% of the region's revenue as well. And then other reasons, I think it's important to say that this has been a journey of about 18 months and that we've built up a lot of trust, a lot of goodwill, a lot of relationships, and not just between councils, but with iwi chairs as well. And so maintaining that momentum, trust and goodwill. I think as much as possible, we have built in safeguards around local voice, and there's always opportunity to improve and refine the model in that regard. It's also about determining your own future, being able to co-design a CCO with other councils, as opposed to sitting back and letting perhaps someone else determine that future for you. And so it is about the opportunity for leadership, the opportunity to create a legacy if you believe that this is really important for the long term of your communities. Really important that, and I feel really strongly about this in terms of Te Mana o Te Wai, to me, at the moment, we have a fragmented rivers, and that the more that we can look at a whole river and what's going on in the river and how one organisation is impacting that river, we can make some really strategic decisions about where best to invest. But that requires good relationships with the regulator, and getting a buy-in from the regulator as to that investment compliance strategy, which speaks to smarter consenting. And in terms of financial sustainability, I think every council's got affordability issues, whether they're big or small. The more that we can share costs, even if we just look at overheads, those things that the customer don't add direct value to the customer, to release OPEX, to release CAPEX, to deliver more value to the customer, the better. And I think it's important that we realise that we're not promising to lower cost to customers, but that we are lowering cost to customers compared to, I don't want to say status quo, but the alternative, yep. And then lastly, Marlon's talked about economic regulation, the real impacts that is likely to have on a council, and the more that we can have a collective response and support each other and dealing with economic regulation makes sense as well. Mike?
It's two things. One, I'll go to my first one actually, Martin. So Vaughan alluded to a whole bunch of councils, and we're one of them, have got debt ceiling issues. And we need to make this decision fairly soon. Is someone going to give us some ballpark, like reality, sort of maybe best guess of what it's going to cost to set the CCO for us? And maybe you're on the side of caution costs as well, like to give us some ballpark. Are we going to be able to get that, or have you got the knowledge to sort of say, hey, this is, when it's hard with not knowing the size of something, but we sort of know where we're sitting too financially. We know we need to do this. So that's my first question to you.
Yeah, I can answer that. For a council of this size, I wouldn't expect there to be a significant number involved in setting up a CCO. It might have six figures, but it'd be very low six figures, right? So, and that would be a cheap outcome in terms of what that additional capacity and debt brings you as a council as you move from, water inside to water separate, funded at 500%, councils funded at 350, well above what you have now. And I actually haven't seen your 10-year financials because you don't have an LTP that's public, but at some point we're going to be sharing numbers and I'll be able to give you a lot more detail around what that all means and exactly what it costs you to set up a CCO.
Cool, thanks for that.
Conversation this morning about there's conversations ongoing with LGFA too about how are the costs of establishing a CCO, should they all be borne by the shareholding councils, or eventually should they be actually owned by the CCO and somehow distributed through the life of that organisation as well? And so there was a conversation again this morning in our 7:30 call about that, because also for some of the smaller councils, right, that figure, even though it's probably not a very big figure for us, will be a big figure for a council of 10,000 people. So we are starting to run the numbers for the next stage of this and the setup costs. And then there's obviously that next conversation about, okay, and what I understand is that the LGFA to date have said, look, once you're serious about this and we've got an idea of the number of councils involved and we've got some governance documentation, we'll have a really serious chat with you then about how we might be able to help you with those costs, the setup costs. But you've got to show commitment. So it's a bit chicken and egg. You got to show commitment and leadership to get there.
All right, that's really good to hear, Steph. Thanks for that. And Vaughan, just my last comment is a comment you picked up on, it's really, I think, about messaging. I think it was yourself, messaging to the community that this is actually better, or might have been you, Martin, this is better than the alternative. And I guess the hard part there for the community is costs are going to go up, and that's the message that I guess the communities have to understand, that regardless costs are going up, they're not coming down. This is the best pathway forward for Waipa if we get them with this CCO along with the other councils. Good luck.
Yeah, comms communications is very important in how things are messaged through the community, because status quo is not an option. What you know today is not what status quo looks like in the future.
I think David, very upfront on that when you communicate. Yeah, you've got to be very upfront on it to get the facts out there. And from my experience, you have to work very hard with the local media.
Thanks for that. Roger, then Claire, and then Liz. Sorry, Liz then. Sorry, Roger. Liz just wants to cut in on to that issue.
Yeah, look, it was just on the our communities and how little I think they actually know. I'm pretty sure that they don't realise that there is all of this work going on, and that Water's Done Well is actually alive, because I think they're still in the three waters stage and think that everything's off the table and asleep at the wheel. So at some point or another, they're going to wake up and realise that all this work is going on. But are we preparing our communities, given that we've got such a fast track and some big deadlines in place? Are we, and I would say we and nationally, are all the councils really sort of working together to get that messaging across? I don't know.
So we are working with the other Coalition of the Willing of Waikato councils to begin an awareness campaign. We decided not to wait. Everyone's at a different stage nationally. DIA aren't doing anything again this time. So we are working on that right now. And you'll see HCC recently launched their campaign with Te Radar. So strongly encourage you to go and see that. So
they've kicked off, but we are about to kick off an awareness campaign and want to get that underway well before Christmas to lead into that. But really agree with that. I know a number of you have raised it, so critical.
Can I just add, with the DIA, there is an opportunity to, if there is some messaging that you'd like at a national level, at a regional level, to work with us, because the next big thing for us is Bill 3, which comes out the week of the 9th of December. There's going to be a lot of people going, what's going on? What's this about? So
can you prove me wrong, Marlon?
What's that?
Can you prove me wrong? and DIA do some work to help us socialise it.
I'm not making any promises. But we're aware of the challenges it brings, especially when a 300-page bill comes out talking about how water's going to be reshaped.
It'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
Roger, you've been waiting patiently.
Yeah, thank you. That last little conversation made me smile because just looking at the local media and, they want people to read the papers. The importance that they have is in the quality of the output in terms of water services, but all of the words that go beforehand are really, a lot of people will probably just quickly turn the page. So it is a challenge. But one of the things that I was going to ask, and it's talking about the possible unequal domination of certain members of that of the council, and you've given us all the reasons why you've chosen the number of connections. And one of the questions I asked when I read through the agreement was, can you give us some idea of the number of connections of each of the possible partners? I know that you said we're 16%, but it would be really good to know, because my perception is that there's going to be quite a number of councils that may have a kind of similar level of shareholding.
Yeah. So there's a group of councils, the highest shareholding, and this is based on connections, and we're still gathering, but we've got most of the connections gathered in terms of data, but TCDC is the highest at 21%. And then there's a couple of other councils in that grouping, including yourselves, at 16%, so 16, 17, 18%. And then the lowest council is 2%, 4%, 8%. So there's about 4 councils in that 16 to 21% bracket, including yourselves, and then the rest are 10 or less.
Well, although you haven't got the final detail on the number of connections, can you share with us what you have got?
Oh, by council?
Not here on screen now, but by council, yeah.
Yeah, and again, this is very draft.
That's right. It doesn't matter, but I mean, it gives us an idea.
So Thames Coromandel 21.
Oh, sorry. Do I need to get 10?
Oh, sorry.
No, you can give us it later. I mean, I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I'm not worried for this discussion here.
Okay.
But if you could just take it out to us, so we get
Dawn.
an idea.
Dawn, we've shared it with Dawn.
Yeah.
And so Dawn can share that with you.
That'll be lovely. Thank you.
Claire.
Yeah, so I'm picking up on, the establishment of CCOs. It was just mentioned earlier. So, and I want to make sure that the right amount, or I suppose the maturity of the CCO as it's set up is going to meet the needs of the group that are going to be the constituent members, because I'm aware that Wellington Water has not been a happy story. Yeah, and I understand, Marlon, that you know all about that. So I want to avoid stuff like that. Yeah, so really appreciate it if you could share what you think might have been, I suppose, mishandled or could have been done better early on, so that we can, have confidence that if we are going to go into a multi-council CCO, that we're going to avoid some of those pitfalls.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd be saying to the management is that you can never over-communicate with councillors. So I would be sending you an information pack monthly on what's happening, what things are changing, what you set out as your strategic objectives and what we're doing to achieve those. Because what happened in Wellington Water is there was a very limited amount of communication going on, and things didn't pan out well to the point where things like culture were starting to be blamed, but actually it was a fundamental breakdown in communication. So apart from the fact that Wellington Water ran like it was 6 different organisations within one, it didn't really achieve the synergies or efficiencies that were projected at the beginning when there was supposed to be a lot more collaboration. Yeah. So there were a number of fundamental issues that, you know, I mean, I'm just here to help make sure that that thing's successful. So I'll be sharing them with management and yourselves as we move through that process.
That's really good to hear, and the fact that communication, is fundamental to everything. I mean, I was worried that there might have been a bit of sort of idealism or naivety about the level of complexity and you know, like the layers that would be needed to integrate all of the different functions within, you know, a far more complex beast. I don't know, like, yeah, that's why like that could be part of the setup thing, that we've actually got to make sure that it's got the capability to handle that much broader work program and all the other things that are needed to work behind the scenes to coordinate it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, Wellington Water was basically a maintenance company, and they wouldn't like me saying that, but they didn't run the billing, they didn't manage customers, yet they were responsible for outputs every day when they were impacting customers' lives. So they had no clear channel to talk to them apart from through councils, and it became very complex the way the communication channels worked. So there are a number of challenges that, depending on what model you take, I'm not trying to influence any model, I can certainly show you the shortcomings of each of those for consideration.
And it sounds like you are happy to work with us, you know, as we go down this journey and sort of.
Oh, look, absolutely. DIA is here to help, but then I would also sit here and go, actually, you've got to get someone like Carl Tucker. Probably there's not anyone else who knows more about this sort of stuff in the country right now. So I'm sort of thinking you're going to be okay. I'll go and work elsewhere, but I will dip in if I see anything wrong.
Oh, excellent. Monty, and then Roger.
You don't have to answer this. Steph, this is to you. So I'm just trying to reconcile this with yesterday's workshop. So this is exploring one of yesterday's recommended options. Question is, what about the other one?
Yeah. So that's.
Sorry. All right. No, that's me. One day I'll learn. Claire's forever hopeful. There's further work to be done on that, Monty. Obviously, we've been working on this for 18 months. And it was made public, Hamilton City Council left this model probably about the time I started. I don't think it was me, but end of August, Lance said, we can't be in too many streams, we're out. At that point in time, this situation was different. We need to have further conversations with HCC and Waikato. Obviously, been continuing to talk at a leadership level, but the development of that from our perspective has been done in a very separate channel to this. So we've obviously got full disclosure on this, but it's one of the things that Carl and Dawn and I will do to understand what that is looking like and to be able to bring you a comparative option. And they are two quite distinctive options, right? So, but great question, Monty, and I was fully expecting that today. Yeah, but again, I want to reiterate that Lance and Gavin have been nothing more than open and engaging, as have the other CEs through this whole process. So it's to me, that's a really great signal across the Waikato. And I also think that whatever happens, it's very clear that everybody's expecting at some point, whatever CCOs are set up now, to come together and ultimately form a Waikato model. Yeah.
And just from an independence perspective on the situation, sorry, Vaughan, I'm pleased that you're thinking about an alternative option because it gives you a power of strength and negotiation. And I think you should play both of those out. Sorry, mate.
Roger.
Yeah, no, and Steph in part there did answer a little bit of my question, and it goes back to the whole of river approach that we're talking about, but the likelihood that of this Hamilton City will not be part of this agreement. Now, is there any possibility of areas of conflict or anything like that, with particularly in the use of resources cross-border?
might jump in there and think, I can look at Vaughan and I both sitting here thinking, but Roger, I think that there's a real commitment to work together. I think there's just an understanding that our current positions mean we've got to go and pursue what is best at this point in time. And HCC have been very clear about that's what they're doing. They've got a bunch on their plate. They've got to work at speed. They're trying to resolve their issues. But in terms of actually managing for the best outcomes of consumers, for the environment, for our iwi partnerships, I would expect that if there were two CCOs set up, that they would work together and collaborate. If I look at Marlin and think, how does central government perceive this? Obviously, central government would be expecting us to work collaboratively and constructively for the outcomes we're all being set up or designed to achieve. So I would expect the two entities to be able to work together, just like entities are working together every day of the week at the moment. But I'm happy to be.
Yeah, the only thing
Well,
I'd
no,
add
I
is,
was just thinking about, that the new wastewater treatment plant that's going to be cross-border, whether there are areas similar to that elsewhere. But
So Marlon, what Roger's referring to is the Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
again, I just think
Independent view again.
it comes to good planning. Yeah.
Look, I think it's, this is a personal opinion, no one else's. I think it's a real shame you weren't able to figure out a deal between the three councils and potentially including Fonterra to set up the Southern Wastewater Treatment for the capacity required to deal with growth in this region. I think doing each council doing its own thing is probably not the most optimal outcome. And again, personal opinion, but I've seen this and the outcomes of collaboration getting really good outcomes, and that was a perfect example.
So it's quite a good sort of segue into just one of the 2 points I was going to make. And one was that something that hasn't really been touched here for obvious reasons, but I think you can't underestimate the message it sends in terms of that regional collaboration and leadership piece too. I do know even from a future-proof level, right, when the absolute refreshing look on Minister Bishop's face in particular when he saw that we were actually a reasonably sane, coherent, collaborative, friendly bunch, I think was reasonably unique. I understand it from his experience around the country, so don't ever underestimate, I guess, the message and the standing and, I guess, mana that gives the region to show that we actually can collaborate, and what that then means for things like regional deals and any other things going. It's really excellent basis upon which to continue to find common ground, I suppose. But my question, at the risk of being a bit of a glass half empty, excuse the pun, but what are the disadvantages that you can see and what worries you? Is there anything that worries you, anything that keeps you awake going, I don't know about that bit of it? And I appreciate that it's probably a bit mean to put you on the spot, but we've been told all the great things. Are there any bits that you feel would be disadvantages to going to something like this? And it's probably mean of me to ask, but.
Look, I think collaboration is going to be really tough. I don't think this group and the region has sat in a room and tried to nut out what it looks like. And having been involved in a number of conversations around the country, they all started off really friendly and then they didn't talk to each other literally for 6 months. And now some of them are coming back to the table when they realise, and I've had to be a little bit of a bully to say you can't do it alone, you have to go back and start having conversations. So there are a number of elements which, the likes of a Carl Tucker will know that you will need to sit down as a group and figure out what your position is, and from that you'll be able to get the deal that's the most optimal for your council, because that's the only way I would tell you to think about this. Sure, region of interest, I'm a big fan of that. That term was coined here, and I love it. I love the idea that you're not just thinking about your council, you're thinking about everyone, but more importantly, how do you get more interest in this region? And that's a collective thing. And that'll give you an advantage over any other zone that I've dealt with, hands down. They are the most collaborative, and I would say that in any other region. So, you've got to take those opportunities and you've got to make them work for you. And I think you're thinking along the right path, so I don't want to skew the boat in any direction, but I think you haven't had the tough conversations yet. And all I can say is, don't be put off by them because they're going to be really tough. And if you need help at that point, then that's where I come back. But like I said, you've got someone like Carl who's done these negotiations. There's been very few done in the country, and he's done a couple of them. So, I think it's really important that you'll have the skills to give you the best deal. And I'm actually kind of pleased I won't need to come back and talk to you anymore. So thanks very much. But if you need me, I'm around. So that's all.
Cool.
Got a
Thanks
few
for
others
that.
to talk to.
Yeah, there's a few others that need help more than you do.
Cool.
Mayor Susan, can I take up your offer of what worries me or
What, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to know what keeps you awake at night.
For me, what worries me is the region. So we've got strong councils, weak councils, and we've been working together over the last 18 months to support, when I was involved in the Waikato plan some time ago, we coined a phrase, for the Waikato to be successful, all parts of the Waikato need to be successful. So, and thinking long term, we want a strong region. And so we've got, in effect, 2 CCOs that are on the table. And if we don't maintain enough momentum in what I call the regional model, those smaller councils, when that time comes, when they realise they need a CCO, but they haven't been able to keep momentum going, they're going to be price takers. They're not going to have the strength of leverage as if we had been able to keep the regional model going to end up with a really strong CCO, because you've got 2 CCOs that can have a good conversation because they're both strong. The alternative is an individual council, because we haven't had the opportunity to keep the regional model going, being quite vulnerable, and the region being quite vulnerable in terms of suboptimal outcomes, because you've only been able to keep one of the CCOs going. So that probably worries me the most, and that therefore what happens to the trust and the relationships that we've been able to build up over the last 18 months if we end up with only one CCO going ahead.
Yeah, all ears. What keeps the other three awake?
Well,
about this?
I can only speak from my experience with the 6 councils coming together, and the outcomes we got across Auckland with us 6 working together, but protecting our own interests, was far greater than if we went our own way. And, there's got to be a bit of give and take along the way. There will be possibly issues that are important to you that you might have to park for a later day. So, we had like the next Auckland water source after the drought. Most of us wanted the Waikato River. A couple of councils didn't. It took about 6 years after we came together to have that issue resolved. So, obviously a group of 6 of you working together, in my opinion, from what I've seen, it will be far better than going your own way.
Sinead.
I guess I'm going to be bold here. I think probably what worries me the most is that the collaboration and everything that has been created turns into competitiveness. And we have heard from a collab perspective, others in the region refer to our team as the enemy. So I guess it's just trying to This is about creating options for councils. This is about councils considering those options and then doing what's best in the context of the information before them. So I guess to me, what worries me is that narrative becoming a them and us and undoing a lot of the good. So just probably controlling it, that this is just about option assessment, doing the right thing. There is no them and us. It's just different options that need to be considered.
Yeah, thanks for that, Calvin.
Look, I'd echo that. I mean, I worry about the little guys. To be honest, someone said earlier on that there is no such thing as status quo. Everyone's lives, council is going to be impacted by this, regardless of what form they choose to take. And yes, there is capacity right here and now in terms of consultants clambering for work, and we know that. But medium to long term, we know that there's a challenge coming, right? And I would have loved Hamilton to have been in the tent right from the get-go, right? Because even at that point, notwithstanding the optionality comment that Sinead made, there's some variable opportunity for council to move, or staff to move from one to the other, right? Mm. So that's a bit challenging. Look, so I worry about it from a risk perspective and making sure that we manage that risk. The one other thing I would say though is, and Vaughan sort of alluded to this, don't assume that there will be another CCO to bring together. The reality is that there are 2 or 3 councils that are currently participating in Waikato Water's done well, and they will be the be all and end all, quite frankly, because they create the scale. And if those councils can't come together, then it makes it really challenging to be viable.
Okay.
Thank you for your honesty,
Yeah.
Calvin.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
I might just add one more thing. I think you're on a pathway to more mistakes. It's just inevitable with the risk that you're taking on, right? But I'd encourage you to, walk forward with those, and what will address that properly is strong leadership, because you're on the right path. But it's not going to be perfection. You're going to have to front as councillors to the community and say why you've backed such a legacy decision, and no one's going to thank you for it. And success will look like no one talking about it in 10 years' time, right? So no one's going to congratulate you. I will. I'll personally buy each of you a wine, but I think that's just the reality of where we are.
10 years or?
I'll buy you one tomorrow.
Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate your candid observations there. Probably a bit mean of me to ask you, but I just, you sort of want to counter to the narrative around this is the answer. You sort of do need to have some of the, hang on a minute, there are sort of some real obstacles to overcome here, or things that will require quite some energy. I guess I've always said right from, the beginning, right back in that sort of 18 months, feels like the early days, that notionally, the idea of everyone wins eventually is kind of how I've always seen it. And I know that in the past, prior to last election, we were probably a majority council of, oh gosh, no, we can't, this Three Waters business, no, really pushing against that cross-subsidisation piece. So, I mean, context has changed enormously since then on so many levels that I think we have to get back to that really long-term strategic view around what is, and with the idea that what's good for my neighbours, good for me, and that eventually we all win eventually, sort of underpin a lot of the way I kind of think about this in general terms. So look, before we draw to a close, we've actually done not too well in terms of time. Oh, we're still going? We aren't we? There's still one more, still a couple more there, aren't there? There's a time.
I'm conscious that you've probably got a lot of this material already that you've been able to digest. Unless Sinead tells me, I think You've seen the milestones. Sorry, I won't go through that one. You understand the on-ramps and off-ramps, you know, that signing up to the heads of agreement is an on-ramp. Then the next off-ramp would be after the foundational documents, the constitution and so on that are approved. And then we're into the board being in place, transition plan being implemented and so on. And then I think we've also talked about to sign or not to sign. And so this is about signing gives you the ability to evaluate an option fully. And there will be a cost and Calvin's talking to the Cs about what that costs look like, and it is fully aligned with what Marlon said in terms of costings. And we're just working through how we distribute those costs in a manner that's fair to the smaller councils. So we're just working through a formula that's different to date, which has been equal sharing. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Kelvin?
So I understand Dawn is including that in the pack to go.
Just for clarity, we only got that last night. The memo came from Kelvin overnight. So it's not that I've been sitting on that holding it back from you. I just want to be clear that that's come through. But yeah, again, further discussion this morning about how that will be split, et cetera, but we can share that with you.
And then to finish with a whakatauki from King Tawhio, which has probably guided us right from the beginning with the iwi chairs. Ki te kotahi te kāko hoka whati, ki te kapuia e kore whati. You know, a single read on its own is vulnerable, but together a bunch of reads is unbreakable. And I reflect on when he reigned during the time of the Raupatsu, you know, probably when our iwi were the most vulnerable, and yet his message was about unity. That's when we're going to be most strong. And so that's sort of our philosophy, I suppose, to guide our work.
Hey, thank you for that, Vaughan, and for all of you actually for all your input. I'd be quite keen just to do a quick whip around the EMs just quickly to find out what's top of mind in terms of the stuff we've heard here and how you're just generally feeling. I'm not passing around a document to sign just yet, but you know, like I'd be interested to get your feedback in general, high level kind of measure. And for a change, shall I start on this side?
Well,
Andrew.
this will be a real big surprise, but I'd like to say I think interesting today with Matamaki Yahu to come with an endorsement from a workshop like that. I would be delighted if we joined them. Yeah, well, from where I'm sitting, it was a shame that we never got progress with the Waikato, Hamilton City, and Waipa. Back nearly 10 years ago. It's a shame that Three Waters didn't progress further than it did. So let's make sure we don't miss this one and get there.
Hey, kia ora tātou. And from me, as you know, like Vaughan will attest to as well, is that we don't separate ourselves from the environment. So it's really always hoha for me to hear about numbers and joining and all this. Let's just fix the darn water is my whakaaro. But I'm really, really grateful for everybody that's come today to deliver to us, to help us with how we're going to ihu ki te kei o tātou waka, how we paddle this forward. And it would be remiss of me not to say this after yesterday, but you fellas should all support Te Tiriti because it actually supports us in this mode. So tēnā tātou.
Tēnā koe.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm just going to be really brief, but with today's discussion, I'm just feeling a lot more relaxed. Well, getting a lot better understanding on the whole situation, and it's becoming a lot clearer to me. So Thank you very much. That's all I'm going to say.
Tēnā koutou. Yeah, again, hey, really impressed with what we heard the last couple of days. I pick up on that in 10 years' time. No one talks about this, no one knows about this. One region. So I'm just going to put it on the table. One region. This is the start of one region, one council, one mayor. Here we go. Okay, just putting it out there. This is he kakano, this is the seed.
Brilliant. And Mike Pettit will be the emperor of the region, right? Roger.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've been really pleased with this workshop today. I think thing that stands out to me is that we're in a unique, well, we're not unique because Waikato District have the same thing, that they've got two options in front of them. And we've got two options in front of us, really, as I see it. I feel a little bit disappointed that that Hamilton City wasn't part of this overall agreement right from the start. But I take Steph's point that, eventually that will be the case. And I think endorse Mike's view that it will be the whole of the Waikato. I'm very much in favour of us keeping our options open on this this agreement going forward. So yeah, in favour of possibly a tick at this stage for moving forward with the heads of agreement as at level 2.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Roger. Appreciate it. Marcus.
Yeah, so this is it's our round 2 or round 3 now, if you count 3 waters. So I'm supportive of it. I'm just a bit nervous around the communications and talking to our ratepayers and our people, because we need to start talking to them about this, what this means. It doesn't mean cheaper water or reduction in costs, and I think we have to be really careful about telling them that and bringing people along for the story, because otherwise, this will come back and bite us with everything else, and that would be a bit sad.
Yeah, thanks. And I found this session really valuable as well, and it's helped address some of the concerns that I've had. And I feel that the approach that's being taken, it makes sense to me. Yeah, so I think that I'm comfortable with proceeding with, the heads of agreement. I still would, I do appreciate the honesty of the people that have spoken today, that there will be still some risks. So I'd be keen to understand how we can reduce those risks and avoid some difficult times or mistakes, and the best way to do that. I would love to see the collaboration that's been talked about today. I still would like to have some more information about the different characteristics of the various councils that we're considering, in part of this, and agree that having a session about our strategic priorities and, what we want to achieve, I think would be a really good next step to do soon as well. I do see this as different from the original Waikato water study and also the Three Waters thing. I mean, this is more local than the Three Waters thing, and it's an optional thing. It's not being forced on us, and we're trying to work out what's actually going to work for us and for our communities. Yeah, and I do agree with the importance of communicating and the messaging. Yeah, it'd be really good to set that out really well as well. Yeah, but overall, really pleased with today. It's been really good. Thank you.
Oh, great stuff, Claire. Monty.
Okay, this has been good for me. The exploration of the transition provisions has been really good. I've got a bit more clarity there. My inclination is definitely to carry on with this regional model. Quite like your point, Vaughan, that the regional model, keeping that alive is quite important, because we know Hamilton's doing a big CCO. So therefore to have a regional CCO seems to me like it's a good outcome for the region, and it sets us up well. So my inclination is definitely to carry on. And of the two models, what we were calling the growth model or the regional model, probably the regional model seems to make quite a lot of sense. So that's me.
Hey, I'm just really happy that Claire's happy at this point in time. I know, no, well, Claire's all over the detail, and and if you're feeling comfortable, that gives me a lot of heart right now. I think we possibly all really feel that way. So, look, good's a really, really great start. Look, one little bugbear with me at the moment is timing. It's something I agree with lots of the other things, but the timing for me now is starting to look really like a really short period of time to get this job done. That really concerns me, because all it takes is, I guess, a breach of trust with some of the potential regional partners, whether we go regionally or next door. All it takes is that for this to unravel. And I think that a couple of points made around the relationship, how important that's going to be to get this deal done. So I don't know how we can help that. Maybe a few more gatherings, because we've got to be able to trust our partners going into this. So there may be some work that we can do informally that perhaps might help going forward. I don't really know. I mean, we don't really know much about a lot of our other councils, and perhaps that's something we should do, start to think about if we're going to be working with them.
Cool. Hey, look, thanks for your feedback. And yeah, I can't really add anything more than that. I think you've all covered all of the positives and the general positivity, I guess, around that most of us are feeling around this piece of work that has been ongoing for obviously some time. And it's always a challenge because at a mayoral level, we've been kind of having these discussions for quite a time. And it's always a challenge to know when to land it and how to land it. And I know that there was a sense of frustration that as a council, we knew the issue was out there and there'd been this work being done, but it's really neat to finally have it kind of come to fruition and to be received really warmly. I think is quite gratifying. To your point, Liz, we're off to rural and provincial, so we'll start maybe hoodwinking them in and have a good little bit of a chin wag tonight. It starts at 5. No, you're right. That's a big piece in it. So, look, without any further ado, I think that's probably everything needing to be said today. Any closing comments from any of you before I invite Dale Marie to close us? Anything final words?
Again, this is all about leadership as far as I'm concerned, and just appreciate the leadership that's been shown. So kia ora tātou.
Yeah, likewise.
Me koe hoki.
Yeah, great.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora koutou I tai mai ki tēnei whare o mātou. Kia tau nā manaakitanga o te mea ngara ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia, te hua, ma kihi kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori. Kia tūturu, kia whakamaua, kia tīna, hauie, huie.